Hi friends. So the last video was an Apex Legends review, and the primary reaction I got, first of all, was super positive, so thank you. I feel real good about that. And second, it was people saying like, hey, I want to try this game out. And that got me thinking about conversations I have when I'm playing with friends, and we're all kind of debating about which character to use or which one is the best and stuff like that. So I figure I'm going to do this research and put this video together to help introduce these characters to new players, and also maybe give players who've been around for a while like some ideas on who they might want to use. Let's do it. So there's a couple basic things we should get into first. Everyone in Apex has the same movement speed, the same health values, and does the same amount of damage with every weapon. However, they do have different hitboxes and silhouettes, so some characters are easier to hit than others are. Despite that, choosing the character is really just about which abilities you want to have and who you find to be the most interesting. Each character also has a passive ability that's always active, a tactical ability with a short cooldown period after you use it, and an ultimate ability that has a longer cooldown. The most popular character in Apex Legends is probably Lifeline. Lifeline is a support character, and her support comes in the form of her healing abilities. Her passive lets her use shield and recovery items 25% faster, while also increasing how fast she revives down teammates by 25%, and placing a shield in front of her during that revive animation. Her tactical is a healing drone that heals anyone close to her for a short amount of time, and her ultimate calls in a Lifeline package. In practice, Lifeline's passive is just what it sounds like. Apex gets real crazy as soon as someone in your squad gets down, and ideally you want Lifeline to be the one reviving them, since she revives people noticeably faster than anyone else does, but that's not always going to be an option, obviously. The shield on her revive blocks all incoming and outgoing bullets, so it's super useful, but it also makes it almost impossible to be stealthy while reviving because it's also really noticeable. Still, a blatantly obvious but fast revive is way better than just having a dead teammate.
Shield up.
Lifeline's tactical, the healing drone, is fantastic because it heals multiple players at once. It's a heal over time effect, so they'll have to sit still for a while, but the number of situations where it's a huge help cannot be overstated. I've seen a lot of players linger around in the ring for a while to get loot, then cross over to the safe spot and get all that lost health back in seconds just because they have a Lifeline drone. The drone is also commonly used in firefights where your team shares the same cover point. Honestly, the worst thing about the heal drone is that people just don't use it as much as they should. It's ready to go every 60 seconds, so it's reasonable to use it in or after every single encounter. Just keep in mind that enemies in range of the drone will also be healed by it.
Come on, say hello.
And finally, Lifeline's ultimate drops a care package. There's a random care package that just drops naturally throughout every match, and the stuff in Lifeline's package has some limitations compared to what you can get in the natural one, but it's still a very easy way to get purple drops for your whole party. So speaking specifically, there are 3 slots in every Lifeline package. To balance stuff out a little bit, Lifeline's package has a 6-minute cooldown, which makes it the slowest ultimate in the game, but because of this, players just feed Lifeline's ultimate accelerants pretty much the whole game, so if you're playing with randoms and you pick Lifeline, just make sure you pay attention to those callouts. It's also worth mentioning that Lifeline's package makes the same sound as the natural care package, and that means it will draw attention to your team. You'll have to be smart about when to use her ultimate.
Listen up, I'm calling a Lifeline package in.
One of the common strategies I see is people will drop the Lifeline package just on the edge of the ring, or even like inside the danger zone to make sure other people won't show up behind them, and then you can always pop a heal drone after your team gets the care package to heal up for the damage you took outside the ring. Oh, and by the way, anybody can open a Lifeline package whether they're on your team or not, so don't be that person that drops a Lifeline package and then immediately gets murdered and then gets robbed by the other team afterward.
Standard stock here. Level 3.
I am repairing myself.
Since everybody in the game is kind of balanced the same way and does the same amount of damage and stuff like that, obviously you can still get a lot of kills as Lifeline, but she also just gives the group more support outside of just her combat ability, so if you're the kind of person who likes to be the backup or the support for a team, this might be a good character for you to use. Moving on to the other support character, Pathfinder. Pathfinder's support comes in the form of putting the team into tactically advantageous positions. His passive will mark the location of the next ring on the squad's map, his tactical will let him use a grappling hook, and his ultimate lets him fire a zipline. Pathfinder's passive almost never gets used. I've literally never seen a single other Pathfinder than me use it, which is crazy because it can have a huge impact on where your squad decides to go and what your squad's plan is during a match.
For us. Check your maps.
That said, it can be a pain to use because it requires a Pathfinder player to find and use a survey beacon. Survey beacons are placed in static locations across the map, usually on top of buildings and stuff like that, and using them takes about 7 seconds, during which you can be shot. But after using one, the next ring will show up on the squad's map highlighted in green. That information is extremely helpful, but keep in mind that each beacon can only be used one time per match, and they're kinda out of the way. Pathfinder's grappling hook tactical is probably the most stylish tactical in the entire game. It's straightforward given that it just pulls Pathfinder toward his target, but that's a useful option to have. You can use it to reach high places faster than you can by walking or climbing. You can use it on enemies to pull yourself to them and kick them. You can use it after murdering a whole squad of people on the supply ship and then pull yourself to your teammate's death box and grab their beacon on the way down. It has its moments. With a 15-second cooldown, you get plenty of chances to test it out, and it's really only limited by how creative you can be. Pathfinder's ultimate puts down a permanent zipline that can be used by anybody. The range on this thing is way farther than you might think, and it gives you the option to reposition your entire squad. I've personally used it to get my team to and from a care package, up cliffs, out of the ring, and so on. It only has a 90-second cooldown, which makes it the fastest charging ultimate in the game, so use it often, and keep in mind that it is a little bit noisy, and enemies can also ride your ziplines, but you can also use that knowledge to set up ambushes and stuff like that. The last thing you should probably know about Pathfinder is that at the time of this recording, he has a really inaccurate hitbox. There's a lot of invisible space around his character frame where he can still take damage, and he can also be hit like between his elbows and his hips, even though obviously that's not actually part of his body. Respawn has promised to address this. In fact, it sounds like there might be a change coming like in the next couple days that'll fix it. And it's not like a game-breaking problem, but it will definitely cause you to take more hits than you might expect to.
Let's go this way.
So the best case scenario for a Pathfinder player is going to be somebody that like knows the map pretty well and has some experience. Like being brand new to the game, maybe not the best choice to use Pathfinder, especially since you have to use the like momentum for swinging and all that sort of stuff and just kind of be used to how the game moves. But once you have that level of experience and everything, Pathfinder is actually a really great character, and his zip lines are invaluable.
The important thing is not to die. Ha ha ha!
Let's move on to the defensive characters. Gibraltar is the first defensive character you'll have unlocked. His passive is a gun shield that pops up when he aims down the sights, his tactical is a dome shield, and his ultimate is an airstrike. Gibraltar's passive spawns a shield in front of him whenever he aims. It blocks a set amount of damage before it needs to recharge, and it's also possible for him to be hit by shots that go around the shield. This passive is quietly one of the most impactful abilities in Apex, for better or for worse. The shield is so visible that unless you turn it off, most enemies are going to notice you as soon as you aim down the sights. At the same time, because you have a shield up, you're going to affect the opponent's thought process. The gun shield will either make squads focus on you to bring you down quickly, or make them ignore you because they think the shield's going to take too long to shoot through in the middle of a firefight. The latter is a big mistake on your opponent's part, because if they stop shooting you, you can still keep shooting them because you can shoot with the gun shield up. And people make that mistake all the time. Gibraltar's tactical ability deploys a dome shield. This shield blocks all incoming and outgoing ordnance and bullets for 15 seconds. The applications for a giant shield are kind of obvious, but just keep in mind that it does make noise when you put it out. It makes a constant noise while it's up, and it's super bright and colorful, so it will draw attention to your location. Maybe don't use it in situations where you're trying to snipe from a distance, or where you don't want the other team to know you're there, for instance.
Dome shield out.
Gibraltar's dome shield is often used in combination with his ultimate, which is an airstrike. Him and Bangalore both have airstrike ultimates, but Gibraltar's ultimate explodes immediately, whereas Bangalore drops bombs that take a little while. We'll get to that later.
Raining down some destruction.
These bombs will deal damage, and they'll also shell shock anybody hit by them. Being shell shocked in this game means that you can't sprint and you have blurred vision for a while. In the case of Gibraltar's ultimate, that blurred vision lasts for 4 seconds. By dropping the airstrike right outside of his dome shield, Gibraltar can stave off an aggressive enemy squad while buying his team time to escape, revive, reload, heal, or whatever. Airstrikes are also a great way to flush enemies out of cover, but my personal favorite way to use them is as a means of softening up 2 teams that are already in combat. You can get a lot of damage on them from a far distance, and you never have to give away your location. Gibraltar is also another character with a large hitbox, although it does kind of make sense because he's a big dude, but just make sure you make good use of your shields. So I personally feel like Gibraltar might be the most underrated character in Apex Legends. His size makes him like an easier target and all that stuff, but those shields can really change a fight, and if you use his ultimate well, you also are a great offensive tool to your team too. People should definitely play Gibraltar more.
Let's land here.
I feel most alive when rapidly approaching my death.
The other defensive character is Caustic. He's one of the 2 unlockable characters, meaning you'll either have to spend 750 Apex coins, which is like $10 in real life money, or spend 12,000 legend tokens to get him. Right now you get 600 legend tokens per level up, so mathematically you should have enough to get him by level 21, and I think I did, but everybody on the internet when I was researching for this said that you have to get to level 23, so I guess you have to get to level 23. Either way, it doesn't take long to get there. I got to level 21 in like maybe 4 or 5 hours, something like that.
Reloading.
Taking a moment to heal.
Reloading. This whole squad has been dealt with.
So to make sense of the character, you kind of have to explain how his gas works. Whenever there's gas on screen, his passive highlights enemies that are affected by that gas, even if those enemies are behind walls or behind cover. Now this buff doesn't extend to Caustic's teammates, so it can kind of be a double-edged sword, but as we discussed, that's kind of true of a lot of Apex abilities. The Nox gas itself can be deployed by either his tactical ability or his ultimate ability. The tactical drops a gas trap, which is a bomb-looking device that explodes whenever it gets shot or if an enemy gets too close to it, even if it's on the other side of a wall from them. He can drop up to 6 traps at a time, and any traps that don't detonate can still be recovered. The range of the gas is actually larger than the trap's trigger range is, so that means if someone's close enough to trigger the gas trap, and then they run out of it after it triggers, they're still going to take damage because the range it goes out is so big. The effect of the gas is that it prevents sprinting and it obscures vision for everybody except for Caustic players, including enemy Caustic players, but it only does damage to actual enemies. The longer an enemy stays in the gas, the more damage they take, up to a maximum of 10 damage per tick. Considering that they're also slowed down by the gas, and they can be shot, this is a pretty devastating effect, but right now most players agree that the gas needs to do more damage for Caustic to be a really useful character. It's also possible to shoot the bottom of his gas traps before they detonate to disable them, so you'll need to be careful about where you put them. His ultimate is a Nox gas grenade. It's the same type of gas you get from the traps, but throwing it from a grenade means you can send it out from range instead of hoping someone triggers your trap. This ultimate form also spreads the gas over a larger area, and it lasts for 10 seconds instead of 12, which is a really long time during a shootout. In practice, Caustic's Nox gas is very effective, but it's also very situational. The traps have to be placed in spots where they're likely to catch enemies off guard but won't cause too many problems for your teammates, and that's a tricky balance, considering that if your squad is hunkered down in a tight space, they're basically screwed as soon as your gas goes off. It does feel great to outsmart people with traps in the grenade ultimate, but the situational nature of this whole idea in a battle royale game where you never really know what those situations are going to be make the majority of the community feel like Caustic is kind of a low tier character. Another popular strategy is to get people caught in the gas and then throw grenades at them. I've seen entire squads wiped out by one Caustic throwing one gas grenade at them, and then an arc star grenade, and then a frag grenade, and it's over.
New kill leader appointed.
New kill leader. Soon to be me.
Moving on to our other unlockable character, we get Mirage. His unlock condition is the exact same as Caustic's, so you have a choice once you first get to around level 23 of which one of those you want, and most people choose Mirage. His passive is an automatic decoy, his tactical is a deployable decoy, and his ultimate is a cloaking device, and more decoys. His passive is basically useless in practice. It spawns a decoy and makes Mirage almost invisible for 5 seconds, but only after Mirage is down. The idea is you can crawl away and hopefully be revived or maybe lead an enemy on a chase while they try and execute you, but neither one of those ideas really impacts the game that much. Mirage's ultimate is more useful, but it's similarly kind of underwhelming. He spawns a crowd of decoys and then he goes invisible for 5 seconds, and you can move around, you can reposition and all that, and that can be great in a firefight, but only sometimes. I've used it to like jump out of windows when my health was low, or to like sweep around behind an enemy, but the problem is you can't interact with anything or use any weapons or items while you're invisible. With that limitation in place, there's not a ton of utility to this, which sucks because it's an ultimate. However, Mirage's greatest strength isn't his tactical ability. He sends out a decoy in whichever direction you're aiming and will repeat whatever action he was doing when you deployed it. There are so many excellent ways to use this ability, it is ridiculous. Apex almost feels like a completely different game when you play as Mirage. You can send a decoy running around the corner to throw an enemy off your trail, but you can also do stuff like run one out of a building so that you can bait a sniper to shoot it. If your decoy gets shot in any of these situations, the game will tell you and your teammates where that shooter is. Considering this ability only has a 15-second cooldown, you can just abuse it. There's a pretty good chance that Mirage's tactical is borderline OP. I don't use that phrase often, but it just might be. The character is balanced overall because his other two skills leave a whole lot of room for improvement, but that tactical is just nuts. To be honest, it even feels good when you're the one that's getting killed by it. He may not offer the team that much, but the decoy tactical makes him a fantastic offensive character.
Go bamboozle.
In the right hands, Mirage is super dangerous. Like, if you can take good advantage of his tactical, you can really dominate pretty much every encounter you come into. And since Mirage is one of the characters you have to unlock, it's actually pretty good because you have some experience with how the game works and how like the flow of combat is, and you'll be able to use his tools better with that experience.
Well, let's just say little birdie told me all about you.
The second most common character I see in Apex is Wraith. Her passive is a stranger danger warning, her tactical lets her void walk, and her ultimate creates portals. Wraith's passive is probably more valuable to a team than anybody else's passive. It really is just a voice that tells you when you're in danger, but danger can mean a lot of things in this game. It can pop up when people aim at you, it can pop up when you get pinged, when you're near traps, when people sprint behind you, and all types of other situations. And then there are a bunch of situations where it just won't pop sometimes. Like, it's all just part of her whole mysterious vibe she's got going on, which is why the description just says, a voice warns you when danger approaches. As far as you can tell, it's on your side. I think the whole vibe is actually kind of cool. When one of these warnings shows up, you get a prompt to press a button and share that information with your teammates, and that opens the door for tactics such as having a Wraith player run out into the open, wait till she gets a warning, and then share that info to the party and escape. Which leads me to Wraith's tactical, which is her void walk, a fantastic escape tool. Basically, it makes her mostly invisible and completely immune to all damage for 3 seconds. With a 15-second cooldown, it means she can do this a whole lot, and it gives her an advantage in close range combat that no other character has. A Wraith at close range using this ability and a shotgun is probably the most dangerous opponent you will ever face in Apex. The drawback is that all enemies also become invisible while you're void walking, so it's not always easy to come out of the void ready to shoot. And then also, and what I think is a cool little detail, if two Wraiths void walk at the same time, they can actually see each other inside the void. Her ultimate creates a portal. When you activate it, you drop one end of the portal, and then you get a 25% speed boost. From there, you have to press another button to drop the other end of the portal, and once you do, you, your allies, and enemies can just teleport between those 2 points for 1 minute. You can't shoot or interact with stuff like doors and boxes while you place the portal, but you can climb things and use Wraith's tactical, which means you can void walk while you're out placing portals to protect yourself. Also, dead teammates can use portals too, so if you need someone to climb through a portal to get revived, that's a very valid option. This ultimate, kind of like Pathfinder's zip lines, creates lots of tactical scenarios. I've seen it used just to bait an enemy team into an ambush, but I've also seen it used to scout out an area and then pop back when there's danger, and then turn it into an ambush afterward. Early on in the game, I had a lot of scenarios where I needed to revive an ally who was outside the ring, so I could have just dropped a portal inside the ring, ran out to them outside, revived them, and then popped back through the portal and we'd have both been safe. I did not do that because I thought about it after the fact every time, but it would have worked and it would have been dope. All that said, the biggest drawback to Wraith's ultimate is that she can be shot while she's running to place the portal exit. If you combine that with the fact that she can't shoot while she's placing the portal either, then it means you almost never get to use this during a fight. So keep that in mind.
Getting shot at. This won't hurt. Hold on.
So yeah, I would call Wraith the second most popular character. I do see her in a whole lot of teams, just not quite as many teams as I see Lifeline. One of the other reasons why people like Wraith is that she is the smallest character. Her position where she runs and like position that she moves, her body is like kind of curled up, hunched over, I guess, a little bit more than most other characters. So she's harder to shoot than most characters are. It's not a huge deal. Again, it's not going to like change the game, but it's certainly noticeable. But for all I know, they could patch the game tomorrow and change that.
Introducing your champion. Want a tip? Go back to boot camp.
The third offense type character in Apex Legends is in my opinion the best character in the game, Bangalore. Her passive is a speed buff when she's under fire, her tactical is a smoke grenade, and her ultimate is an airstrike. Bangalore's passive grants a 25% speed boost for 2 seconds when she's hit, and there are multiple ways to take advantage of this. If you get shot and you shoot back while you're moving, you're that much harder to hit because you're 25% faster. If you sprint and then you slide while this buff is up, the increased speed from the buff will transfer into your slide momentum. That combination makes Bangalore the most mobile character in the game, which also means she's the hardest person to kill. Her tactical adds even more to that move. It allows her to shoot a smoke grenade wherever she's aiming. She can hold up to 2 smoke grenades at a time and they have a 30-second cooldown. This is a fantastic tool in practice because she can deploy those smokes during just about any other action, including healing, reloading, applying shields, etc.
Top in the chimney.
You can sprint, slide, shoot a smoke at the ground, and then jump out of that slide, and there's basically nothing an enemy can do to damage you or really even find you after that. That smoke does impair everybody's vision, which includes you, your teammates, and your enemies, and it spreads across a huge area, but it lasts a super long time, which makes it a great offensive and defensive tool. If you have a weapon with a digital threat attachment, which is the one that highlights enemies when you aim, you can still see opponents through that smoke anyway.
Already on my mark, firing for effect.
Bangalore's ultimate is a creeping artillery strike that can be used every 270 seconds. It's similar to Gibraltar's airstrike, except the bombs take 8 seconds to detonate and cause 8 seconds of shell shock, whereas his detonate instantly but only shell shock for 4 seconds. Because Bangalore's artillery strike moves across an area, it puts enormous pressure on enemy squads. It basically forces everyone in range to hide indoors, which can be a tough thing to do when you can also fire her smoke into the area, which makes it hard to find a position where you're safe in the first place. And again, because it's an airstrike, she can do all of this without ever revealing her location. Bangalore's tools make her a great offensive character, but in the hands of a skilled player with a little bit of awareness, she's also extremely tough to pin down. Some characters have defensive skills, some characters have offensive skills, some have mobility buffs, some have skills that are best suited to helping the team. Bangalore's speed and smoke give her all of these options, and to top it off, she has the most deadly ultimate in the game. She's not too good in a way that breaks the game or anything, but when you compare her directly to any other character, her toolset is either just as good as theirs or better.
My sights, down another.
Come up here? Oh, their loot's up here. Damn, that was sick.
Gas trap deployed.
Yeah, threw a grenade and they all died.
So yeah, like I said, I think Bangalore is probably the best character in the game. You have to be able to use her movement tools well. You have to know the game pretty well and be able to use those smokes all the time for her to be that good. But if you can, she has to be the hardest character to kill. At least for me. The game's only current tracker type character is Bloodhound. Bloodhound has a passive that tracks clues, a tactical that reveals hidden enemies, and an ultimate that buffs those options. Bloodhound's passive is most effective in places where enemies have visited in the last minute. It pops up little indicators around the screen for a bunch of clues, including things like doors that were opened, grenades that were thrown, footsteps, places where people took zip lines, stuff like that. If you approach a set of fresh tracks, you'll get a button prompt on the screen and you can let your teammates know that people were there. Bloodhound's tactical ability does a pulse that reveals traps and enemies in front of you. The animation for this pulse is visible to everyone, including the enemies, and the things that it reveals are snapshotted, meaning you won't be able to tell if things move after you activate it. But on the positive side, it highlights enemies through walls and cover, and it will highlight those enemies for you and your teammates. Bloodhound's ultimate has a ton of uses. It gives you a speed buff, and it makes everything black and white except enemies and traps, which will be highlighted in red. That red highlight works regardless of distance, so you can see an enemy that's super far away because there'll just be a red thing sticking out in the distance where everything else is just black and white. This skill also lets Bloodhound see through Bangalore smoke and Caustic's gas traps. It lasts for 35 seconds too, which is ridiculous because that's 35 seconds where you'll know where everyone involved in the fight is at all times. In some ways it kinda makes Bloodhound like the counter pick to Bangalore or Caustic. I don't have a ton of experience playing Bloodhound, but I will say this. All the best players I know say if you encounter another team and they have a Bloodhound, kill the Bloodhound first. So I actually had never played Bloodhound until I started recording footage for this video. Playing him in the beginning might not necessarily help you with the mechanical part of Apex Legends and figuring out movement and all that sort of stuff, but in terms of just being more comfortable in fighting situations, having all the tracking options and stuff that he has will definitely help you at least place better. if not win earlier on. So yeah, that just about sums up all 8 base characters in the Apex Legends. If you are a new player starting out, like, make sure you do a little bit of experimentation. Try to pick 1 or 2 characters that you stick to, but if you find yourself in a situation where you're curious about an ability, like, definitely try the characters out. But if you do that, one thing to keep in mind, do not play a character for 1 game, die in the beginning, and then say, oh, this character is whack. Like, give it a couple games, maybe play until you have those sorts of matches where you're like deeper into the match, where you have like a clutch situation to figure out when to use their stuff. Like, try to get yourself into situations where you're under duress and you teach yourself how to use those abilities. So don't just like go in a match, die, and be like, oh, Caustic sucks because I died when I landed on the airship at the beginning of the match or whatever. That being said, if you have like other things you want me to cover about Apex Legends or other games, like, definitely let me know in the comments and all that sort of stuff. I don't have plans on my next video yet, but I'm taking requests. So until then, thanks for watching.
You are the Apex Champions.